Hey, so America, France, and the UK have struck Syria, and I have been on the phone and on the news and doing everything I can this morning with our team to check on staff, friends, partners, the people we serve in Iraq who are affected by these things, Syrians in Iraq. And just wanted to give an update here on where things stand. It's 1:30 in the afternoon here on this side of the world, and I've been following a little bit of the feedback you've sent us, a little bit of the feedback you've sent me, and I wanted to just get into some of it because we really strive here to be a people of nuance, and we want to be educational. We want to be helpful to you as you work in your own family and in your own community to understand these things, as you try to lead your kids and lead your churches and your schools and your mosques to form helpful thoughts and foreign policy and shape your theology on how we should respond to these things. So I'm listening, I'm hearing your feedback, and I just want to address some of the things that you've said, some of the things that I've seen in the news, and see if we can continue to add clarity from our position here on the ground and representing what we are seeing as a team because of you, because you've given, because you've been so faithful to keep us here on the front lines of these things for years. I just want to be able to add a little more insight and feedback to the conversation we have going right now. So, look, in this house, we give credit where credit's due. We give honor where honor is due. And our fears over the last couple of days that the Twitter rhetoric of President Trump might actually give rise to indiscriminate attacks against civilians, that has not come true. That is not what President Trump and allies have chosen to do. So current intel and reporting says that U.S. and allies have hit 3 military installations, a research facility, and basically actual material for chemical weapons manufacturing. That is the best scenario of a bombing that we could hope for, to be sure. And so we give credit, we honor that reality. This has not been an indiscriminate attack. This has not been, according to current reportage, retaliation that has taken civilian life. And so we respect that, we honor that, we submit to that truth, and we are grateful for that reality. Now, that said, a couple of nuanced sub-points to that. One, we're told this is going to be a sustained response. So allegedly, this one-off thing that happened last night is not all that we are to be expecting. And so we continue to live in fear. We continue to wonder where the Twitter rhetoric and the Twitter diplomacy and the lack of diplomacy on Twitter and the reality of military response will measure up. Will we come in below the bellicose words of President Trump on Twitter? Will we match the bellicose, unpredictable words of President Trump on Twitter? I don't know that. My staff doesn't know that. Our friends and partners and teams and the people we serve don't know that. And therefore, we will continue to say bombing cannot get us ultimately to the place that we need to go. Now, here's a nuanced thing I want to say about that. For those of you who have pushed back, for those of you who have said this is naive, this is disingenuous to say we cannot bomb our way to peace. To say we cannot bomb our way to peace is not actually to say that there is never any place for bombing. That's not my position. In fact, I have seen U.S. bombs save lives. I've seen U.S. bombs and Iraqi bombs and Syrian bombs and Russian airstrikes. I've seen all these things save lives, even as they have taken lives. So it is not my position that it is never in any case okay to use violence in an attempt to thwart violence. I don't believe that. I think the world is complicated. I think the world is dark. And I think that sometimes we are left with no good options. And you see an ISIS caravan marauding down the road toward some innocent village, knowing what they're saying over their walkie-talkies is their intent to slaughter people. We've seen interventions in that moment undoubtedly save lives. And so it is not my position that when we say we cannot bomb our way to peace, it is not my position that we cannot use bombs to thwart violence. I actually think, sadly, that we can use bombs to thwart further violence. Part of what we cannot bomb our way to peace means is that an air strategy alone will not get us to the place where we claim we want to go. Air strategies, bombing campaigns are not actually primarily about peace. They are not primarily about ending violence. They're not primarily about ending the Civil War. They're not primarily about reaching political detente. They're not politically, it's not a robust enough strategy. It's not a full enough commitment to get us to peace. Bombs can stop an attack, perhaps, in the moment. Bombs can maybe even drive bad guys out in the moment, but bombs from the sky cannot get us to peace. And that's what I want. And I think that's what you want. And so in that way, saying we cannot bomb our way to peace is to say there isn't apparently a comprehensive plan or strategy for what American military interests are or should be in Syria right now. To wit, just last week, President Trump said he wants to pull all of our troops, some 2,000 soldiers, out of Syria altogether. And he wants to do it soon, very, very soon. That would have disastrous consequences in Syria. And so I honor our military. I honor the friends who are there or have been there, who are in Iraq or have been in Iraq and have put their lives on the line to try and mitigate the violence in the region. I honor them in such a way so as to say, if they were to be pulled out right now hastily, I actually think it would, I think their role in the region now is such that a precipitous withdrawal would have disastrous effects. And so I want to make that clear. We shouldn't let this conversation devolve. Certainly my heart and our team's heart is not to have a partisan conversation right now. I believe I said very clearly in my last video that there is a bipartisan war machine that is on the march right now. So these are not anti-President Trump statements or anti-Republican statements. That should be clear. And an overreactive defensiveness on behalf of one party or behalf of one administration is equally unhelpful in this moment. Our position from the ground of years and years of watching war play out is bipartisan. We have critique and we have insights and we have experience on both sides of both kinds of administrations. Now, I'll say this, we are afraid, and our friends and staff and people we serve in Syria are afraid because the U.S. actually has a terrible record, particularly in the last year and a half, a terrible record of missiles going where they are supposed to go and lives being targeted surgically in the way that America is allegedly capable of deploying smart bombs. We have seen huge upticks in civilian casualties because of American airstrikes and drone warfare and things of that nature. So ahead of a bombing campaign, in the run-up and the National Security Council meetings and the press conferences, ahead of all that, we don't have any confidence that America can or will choose to be careful enough to target military only or combatants only, because that is not what our experience suggests. That's not what the data tells us who live here on the ground. Furthermore, what America does is not the only calculus in this conversation. When America declares that they will bomb, then Russia declares that it will up its counter strikes and its counterattacks. And so part of our concern is not strictly what America does, but what others do in response to what America does. We have had our airspace in Iraq shut down because Russian missiles were flying over our heads. And so the complexity of what is at stake here is far more simple, far more complex than some of the simple pushback that suggests America is righteous and America is the only force in the world that can save the day. Look, for those who are invoking the name of God right now to say that America is the righteous defender of the world, particularly those who are invoking the name of God from a Christian perspective, as though the God of the world, the creator of the universe, the divine who is in and through all of us, in whom we move and live and have our being, in whose image Assad, Putin, Trump, ISIS fighters, the Army of Islam fighters, civilians, Christians, Yazidis, Muslims all around the world are made, is somehow partisanly on the side of America or partisanly on the side of one president, Trump. That is simply not the perspective of your Christian brothers and sisters in Syria. In fact, I don't know one Christian personally in Syria that I can think of who is not praising God today for Russia. So I want to make this clear. I know you care about Christians in the region. I know you care about life in the region. I know you care about justice in the region. But in the region, in Damascus, in Aleppo, my Christian friends are praising God for Assad and praising God for Putin, for Russia, for their ability to intercept American missiles against Assad, against Syria. So when we bring our perspective to the table from the ground, you need to know that we are extremely experienced and nuanced at representing a diverse range of people. Now, those Christian perspectives, those, let's call them pro-Syrian or pro-Assad or pro-Putin perspectives, they're not the only perspectives. You know the other perspectives, and we have faithfully reported those perspectives. You know there are rebels who are against Assad. You know there are wanton terrorist groups who are clearly against Assad. You know there are groups that American military is supporting, but it doesn't seem that reportage is breaking through in America that if you want to invoke the name of God to call for a Christian response, there's actually a whole thread of Christian perspective that seems to be blocked out from the West. And that Christian response, our Christian friends, are very much afraid of the U.S., afraid of U.S. interventionism, afraid that if someone like Assad is overthrown, that there will be no bulwark for them against the likes of ISIS, Nusra, Jaish al-Islam, and others. So Assad, President Assad and the Syrian government actually stands for them as a protector. And that's not my endorsement. That doesn't have to be your endorsement. This isn't about endorsements, and this isn't about taking sides. This is about recognizing that this conflict is massively complex. And it's my job to report the complexity of this back to you from our position within half a mile of where last week's chemical attacks took place that have launched off this new round of military action. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. To suppose and position these attacks as being primarily about justice, because we cannot live in a world where chemical attacks are allowed to endure. And what would you have us do? Can we just sit back and do nothing? I believe that is actually the disingenuous position. The American government and military has known that there are numerous chemical attacks that have taken place this year. There are numerous chemical attacks that have taken place since this time last year when America got involved. And so the idea that America, France, the UK is a faithful responder to chemical attacks is massively misleading. It's fair that you may not have heard of these chemical attacks because they haven't risen over the noise in America of sex scandals and special prosecutor investigations and Super Bowl news and whatever else. That's legit and understandable. But that's certainly not the case in the White House, in the halls of the CIA, in the Pentagon. Clearly, they are fully apprised of all the chemical attacks that have taken place in the last year, yet there has been no similar military response. There's been no similar outrage. There's been no similar rush to judgment. There's been no similar invocation of how these monsters and animals cannot be allowed to go unabated and unchallenged in the world. So I simply don't buy, and really very few other people in this part of the world buy, the idea that this is some kind of righteous jump to action. In fact, many fear that this is a wag the dog distraction from other things that the American government may not want to be talking about right now. And if you're not that cynical, great. In the very least, maybe that this is simply a military response because this attack actually broke through the noise of CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, and the like. That because, and only because, it hit our evening news feeds, now we are going to call out this particular chemical attack as one to which we must respond. Well, okay, if that's the case, then some of the other arguments break down. The idea that we can't just sit back and do nothing. Well, in fact, we have sat back and done nothing for numerous and numerous other attacks. And let's talk about doing nothing. Some of you have brought your criticism or a sense of your own, how you encourage yourself in moments like these to say all that is necessary for evil to win is for good people to sit back and do nothing. The logic here I find to be problematic. Sitting back and doing nothing and bombing, and certainly one step before that, threatening to bomb animals and monsters and these kinds of massive escalation language are not the same thing. You cannot threaten to bomb. You cannot instill fear in the heart of a country, its civilians, its children. You cannot do those things and still be found doing something. So, for one, we are doing something. And to invoke that phrase that all that's required for evil to win is for good people to do nothing is misleading. We are doing something. There's others like us that are doing something. We have troops on the ground already that are part of doing something. And we are not doing nearly enough when it comes to diplomacy. We are not doing nearly enough when the so-called madman theory of leadership is what leads the way on this. There is a lot more that can be done. For years, even under the Obama era, which many are very critical of, President Obama and John Kerry did not do nothing. In fact, they oversaw the destruction of one of the largest tranches of chemical weapons in the Middle East. So for all the criticism that administration gets for its red line comments, they actually stumbled into, if clumsily, overseeing a multilateral effort to destroy significant amounts of Syrian chemical weapons. Now, what Syria is doing right now with chlorine actually falls just slightly outside, I guess, the official definition of what is a chemical weapon. And inasmuch as nerve agents are alleged to be involved, then it would seem that they've either made new weapons or did not fully dispose of what they claim to have disposed of. But they did dispose of significant amounts. So that's not doing nothing. That's a massive curtailing of what they might otherwise have been able to do. But if we really care about doing nothing, then maybe more of us should raise our hand. And I say this with all respect. If we really care about effectiveness and not just kicking up dust and giving the appearance of doing something, maybe more of us should get on a plane and stand at the Turkish border and stand at the Lebanese border and stand at the Jordanian border and try to get in. Maybe we should find ways to cross over into Syria. Maybe we should be found on these front lines. Maybe if 100,000 Americans and another 100,000 French and another 100,000 English were literally with our bodies on the line pressing into Syria or sneaking across the border or going in through the front door. Maybe if Germans and Norwegians and Swedes and Swiss weren't those who are maybe not so implicated in Western aggression against Syria were on the ground with our lives in harm's way, with our lives hanging in the balance. Maybe that would change the entire calculus of what's going on. Maybe Russia would be slower to do something. Maybe Syria would be slower to do something. Maybe the U.S., French, British axis would be slower to do something. If we deeply care about doing something effective, rather than just doing something at all for the sake of appearing to be in action, there are options that we have. There are things that have not even yet been tried. And so to claim that this is somehow we're at the end of our rope and we have not anything left to do except but to threaten this massive escalation of bombing, or even to bomb military facilities. There are still many things that have not yet been tried. We ought not abdicate to our governments alone to let them be the sole arbiters of what happens next. We have significant agency. And if we would put enough of our bodies on the line and not just leave it over to brown people and Muslims and dark Christians that we don't really know anything about, if more passport holders from the West would engage, if more people could enter into the fray without all the bellicosity and the anti and regime change kind of language, I think the calculus could change. We're not doing nothing. We're just not doing enough. Now let's talk theology for a minute. For those who are Christians and those who are Muslims and those who are humanists and believe that there is some kind of divine spark in us, those who are spiritualists in that way, I don't think we should be calling anyone a monster in this situation. I don't think we should be calling anyone animals in this situation. I'll speak from a Christian theological perspective. I believe that everyone is made in the image of God. That's how the Christian tradition says it. And in the Islamic tradition, there is no original sin that would mar humanity in the way that Christianity often holds it. And so in both of our cases, we actually believe in a very beautiful thing at the heart of every human. And if everyone is made in the image of God, as the Christian tradition says, that has to include President Trump. President Trump is made in the image of God. President Bashar al-Assad is made in the image of God. Putin is made in the image of God. ISIS members are made in the image of God. And when we talk about them like they're monsters, that wipes out the acknowledgement that they are made in the image of God. Monsters we would not hold are made in the image of God. There is no theological tradition for that. Animals we do not hold are necessarily are made in the image of God. That language in the Christian tradition is reserved for humankind. And so when we vilify in that way, they're monsters, they're animals, we make it easier and easier for us to abdicate our own spiritual responsibility, our own theological responsibility to treat them as though God herself is inside them. As though God himself is inside these people. All of Godness, all of the divine is in Assad, is in Putin, is in Trump, is in you, is in me. And so to threaten to bomb that out of existence, to threaten to wipe that off the face of the earth, is to threaten God's self. It's to say, I have the power, we have the power, our impulse to do something to protect the divinity in these people would even rush to destroy the divinity in these people. And that's the problem with this kind of side taking. That's the problem with this kind of nationalism that actually relinquishes our theological responsibility. Is there evil in the world? Absolutely. Might it have to be met with force? Absolutely. But we should approach the use of force with humility, not bellicosity. We should acknowledge that when we seek to kill the ones we're supposed to love, we are violating the principle that our enemies are men and women just like you and me. If we ought not do nothing, if we have this impulse inside us that we must do something, then we need to explore the myriad ways that we could engage without taking each other's lives, but by laying down our lives. Might it cost us more than a few tweets and a few words on an Instagram account from the comfort of our homes? It might. But if we're unwilling to pay that price, then maybe we should just take our hand off the button for a minute that would cheer on the destruction of other lives. That's the kind of armchair quarterbacking of loss of life that I just don't want to be a part of. And I don't think you want to be a part of. It comes easy, it's a natural impulse, but I don't think it's right. It's been said to me in the last 24 hours that we had to do something to stop Hitler, and therefore we must do something today. So let me say this. There is no comparison to what's happening in Syria right now to Hitler. This is a contained civil war. It's horrific. There is blood on all sides. There's guilt on all sides. But this is not some spilling over, take over the world kind of war. And so we should be careful with those kinds of analogies because they simply don't hold up under scrutiny. What are we doing about it? What is your strategy, Jeremy? What is your strategy? Preemptive love is part of what has been said back to us and laid at our feet this week. I've given honor where honor is due in this situation. I am thankful that massive civilian casualties have not been incurred as a result of U.S., French, and British bombing. We're not single-handedly going to be able to stop war. We're not going to be able to single-handedly stop U.S. airstrikes. So I don't know how to speak into that except to say the truth from where I stand on this front. Here's what I do know. I do know that the kids in Duma, the kids in Eastern Ghouta that we've been with this week, don't know what a banana is. They don't know what an egg is. They're eating paper to stay alive, leaves. They're drinking poisoned, nasty, disgusting water. So what are we doing? How are we not sitting back and just doing nothing? Well, we are doubling down. We're pushing in. We're investing more. We're asking you for more support because we know that you are deeply compassionate and you want to be involved ever more on the front lines for those who are affected most. Kids should know the beautiful taste of a banana. It's awesome. All over the world, kids eat bananas. And they're sweet and firm or mushy and overripe, but they're all good. And the idea that these kids don't know what a banana is or haven't had a chicken egg because they've been so under siege is heartbreaking to me. And you are making it possible for us to change that for them right now. Some of them told us that they've been underground for 20 days. 20 days in tunnels under the earth, hiding out. Sometimes going 24 hours at a time with nothing to eat, not even paper, not even leaves. There's a lot of people injured, like open wounds, injured still right now. We've got mobile clinics right in the mix, right in the fray of all this. We've got more stationary, built-out clinics that aren't mobile, but are in one spot that people are passing through. The shelter area where we're serving most, particularly with food, has served some 60% of all the people that have fled from this conflict so far. We've reached a lot of them because of you. And there's a lot more to do. We think there's maybe 50, 75,000 people still inside Duma, and our whole team hasn't set foot inside yet. In fact, some of our team has been so scared over the last couple of days for the impending U.S. strikes, the fear that missiles would just land anywhere and wipe out anything indiscriminately. Some of our team has pulled out altogether. It's not our way to tell you what you have to do if you're part of Preemptive Love or you're part of our partner teams. If you feel like you need to pull out because the threat is so intense, we bless you and say, yeah, you can pull out. And so some of our team has pulled out altogether, retreated all the way to Beirut for a minute just to make sure that their lives aren't destroyed, their kids aren't left orphaned. They'll be back on Sunday now that the first round of airstrikes is over and we have a little more confidence that the U.S. is not just looking to wipe out entire neighborhoods in retribution. So we're pushing back in. We have indication that we may be the first international aid organization into the area of the chemical attacks on Monday. And we hope to be able to offer more insights and intel, and above all else, above the fray of all this kind of commentary, we will be serving people who have been so massively affected on both sides by the chemical attacks, by the rebels, by the foreign interventions and the fear and trauma that comes along with waiting for that. So we think Sunday and Monday are going to be big days. We need your help getting ready for Sunday and Monday. What kind of response can we mount? What kind of money can we raise in the next couple of days? That's going to largely depend on how widely you share this video, if you tag us, if you put this short link asking people to get involved. $5 makes a huge difference. That's a meal. It's a hygiene kit. It's diapers. It's a lot of things that we could potentially do. $500, $5,000. These are massive gifts right now that go a long way for us. If you haven't considered becoming a monthly sponsor, I would just beg you again to consider that. Go to your partner, go to a friend, go to a spouse, go to coworkers, and just ask, what if we went in on this together? Because Preemptive Love is trying to be a group that's first in and last to leave. And they think they can be first into Duma, where the chemical attacks were on Sunday or Monday. But if they're first in, they're going to be last to leave. They're going to commit to that place. They're going to commit to those people. They're going to help them rebuild their homes. They're going to help them bring electricity back online. They're going to start jobs. They're going to help people stand up on their own 2 feet again. And so they're going to need monthly gifts. They're going to need to be able to see kind of where the financial runway they have starts and stops. And so I just would love for you to consider becoming a monthly sponsor of any amount today so that we can start making some long-term plans for where we go from here. There is nothing too small. It's just about getting some visibility. $1, $5, $100. It's not too small. It's big. It helps massively. Please join us as part of our Frontline monthly giving community. We got a lot of work to do. If this is a sustained American airstrike military response, we don't know what kind of destruction is yet to come. We don't know what kind of people movement is yet to come. We don't know what kind of trauma and fear we're going to continue living in and our people we're serving are going to continue living in. Will it escalate? Yes, the first round was military installations. Might the second round be civilian neighborhoods? These are the questions that we're asking today. But here's what I can tell you. We're in it for the long haul. We've proven that over and over and over again on the front lines of these conflicts. Thank you for being in it with us. We could not do this without you. And we wouldn't want to. Being alone in this, feeling of being alone in this, the feeling of being misunderstood, the feeling of being so far behind enemy lines on some of this that you get attacked from both sides is some of the worst of what it means to be a peacemaker in this space. So thank you. Thank you for being a preemptive lover. Thank you for being someone who says, yeah, the world is scary as hell right now, but I am going to be someone who loves anyway. I don't think that rainbows and unicorns are going to overthrow governments or stop evil. Only a committed, dedicated community of people like you and me, our friends who put our lives on the line every day, really have the power to change a nation. There is a power, there is a force big enough to transform evil into good. And that's the power of preemptive love. So thanks for being in this with us. Grateful for you more than I could ever communicate. Grace and peace.